Hello and welcome to the Capital Games Podcast. I'm the Wiz. I am the Wiz.
And I'm zero.
Well, you okay?
No, just kind of. um, I was killing time real quick on a game.
Oh my God. Well, we're keeping that. So, okay. Well, why not? This was a pretty light week involving with news, but we have some topics we can discuss. Me and Zero haven't been playing much. I played a little bit of Rumbleverse, but not enough to talk about it. I'll probably talk about that more next week. But let's just get right into the stories. Zero.
Well,
Go,
actually, before we get into the stories, I was going to make a mention. This week, towards the end of the week, will be QuakeCon. It'll be an online QuakeCon, but every single store, from PSN to the Nintendo eShop to the Xbox Store and Steam, they're all doing QuakeCon sales, so you can get any id or Bethesda game for crazy cheap. Because um, uh, like, I think some of the Wolfensteins are like down to like a couple dollars. The first Dishonored is like $8 or something like that. Just really insane deals. So if you're a big fan of any of the id or Bethesda stuff, then yeah, it's a great time to start buying up the games right now.
Is it going on now? Because I'm on Steam and I'm not seeing a big QuakeCon banner.
Yeah, it is. Just I don't know why they don't have the banner just kind of prominently showing in the store, but when you click on any of the id or Bethesda titles, there's a big banner on top that says
Oh,
QuakeCon sale.
okay. All right, yeah. Definitely good to mention. And I don't know if we're expecting any big announcements from QuakeCon this year, but if we do, we will cover it next week. So that will be interesting. So why don't we get started with what was announced at THQ Nordic Showcase? They had a showcase Friday in the middle of the afternoon. I believe THQ Nordic is in Europe, so they probably had it late at night. They had it at night with them, so it came up in the afternoon with us. So that makes sense. And they showed off a bunch of games that they decided to announce and reveal. One was already revealed ahead of time as a leak, and that was the Alone in the Dark reimagining. Sarah, did you ever play Alone in the Dark?
No, I did not.
I played the PS1 game. It was terrible, but I know that there were some people who are fans of the PS3 game. I think it did have a pretty diehard fan base, I think, around the time when it was popular in PC. But this is a brand that has not had a game, since the PS3, I think, right? Am I right
Yeah,
about that?
please.
Yeah.
It's been so long.
Yeah. So it would be, and what they showed looked very Cthulhu-esque, I would say, to a certain extent. So, or like an H.P. Lovecraft kind of horror game, I guess. I mean, I'll be honest with you. Since that one game, I haven't tried any of the others. So, if I'm wrong, I'm sorry. But I guess what my question is really, is that really enough to get people to get interested in the property again? Because it looks like they were spending a good amount of money on the game, because it does look good. But I don't know if that type of how do I put this? That type of horror game really resonates with today's horror fans who prefer blood, guts, torture, extreme violence, things like that.
Yeah, and unfortunately, the franchise has had a bit of a weird history too, because um, I think I think the PS3, Xbox 360 game came out to some middling to barely okay reviews, because the gamut of scores that I'm seeing is anywhere from like 39% to as high as a 69%
Right.
for the PS3 one. Then there was a 2015 game, and that was made as a third-person shooter, and it was an online only game, which
Really?
is kind of a weird direction that they took it. So,
Hmm. I
but
remember. I thought I remember that they were making a new one, and either when THQ went down, it got canceled, or it got canceled before that time. So I remember there was a new one that was supposed to come out, and I don't remember anything else about it.
yeah, if I remember correctly, when THQ was still around before the bankruptcy, it was in development, and then just after the um God, what they recently changed their name. Oh, Coke Media. After Coke Media bought
Yes.
out THQ and then turned THQ to THQ Nordic, um, which recently Coke Media renamed themselves to Play On, I
Yeah.
believe.
Yes.
So so it was after that buyout that pretty much just a bunch of people had questions going, hey, there was supposed to be an Alone in the Dark sort of reboot, remake. We don't know what it is, but supposedly it was going to be in the spirit of Resident Evil. So has that been canceled? Is that still a thing? Just inquiring minds had wanted to know. And then finally, it wasn't until just recently that they're just like, hey, yeah, so it's kind of in development. We don't have anything to show for it yet, but we'll talk about it when we get there. And then finally, the world got to see a glimpse of it this past Friday.
Yeah. I mean, it looked cool. It looked like it actually looked pretty good. Horror is not my thing, so I will just be upfront with that. But yeah, I guess if you were looking for more, I don't know, it would be more psychological than it would be the standard horror tropes, then I would see maybe you'd be interested in that. But I don't. Again, horror games are just not my thing. So, do I think it will sell well? It really depends on when they sell it and how they market it. Because if this releases any time around the time where Resident Evil 4 remake comes out, they're kind of screwed. So let's hope they do it well before then, or hope maybe well after. So we don't even know when Resident Evil 4 remake is coming, right? It's apparently might be next year.
I think it's around either March or April next year.
Okay.
I remember one of the recent trailers actually just put a release date to it.
Okay. So anything to add with Alone in the Dark?
Not really, mostly because I really haven't played it.
Oh, okay. So why don't we go towards what else they announced? They showed off Tempest Rising, which was an art. Here's one of the things that surprised me a lot with this showcase. A lot of 4 PC only games. One of them is Tempest Rising, which is a classic standard RTS, a base building ass RTS game, which to in one extent is like, oh, that's refreshing. They're going back to doing RTSs. But then on the other hand, I'm like, well, wait a minute, these died out for a reason. Because A, people stopped playing it, except for maybe StarCraft, and even then people stopped playing StarCraft. And B, like the MOBA essentially killed that entire genre. So I I guess the only question I have for you is what did you think of it? And do you think this has a chance to be successful, even though RTSs are kind of out the door now?
When I saw the Tempest Rising trailer and everything, first thought I had was, oh man, this is Command and Conquer. This is just like
Yes.
spiritual successor to Command and Conquer. I do think that there is room for success, especially in an era now where we have just so many games just trying to focus on things like loot boxes and battle passes and things like that. And games like RTSs, they definitely concentrated more on expansions. So things like just, hey, we've got a whole bunch of missions, some new maps, maybe a couple new units. Expansion is going to be X number of dollars. So I could certainly see something like that happening in the future. If Tempest Rising does pretty good, or if it's set up to possibly be um, workable with potential expansion packs and sequels. I don't know,
Mm.
but on top of that, there's just been a massive void with the RTS genre. Blizzard's no longer making Warcraft games because World of Warcraft became kind of the cash cow. StarCraft collapsed on itself, but it wasn't helped that a part of the StarCraft 2 scene collapsing was due to some very, very serious match fixing in Korea. And I think um, 5 out of the 7 people in this match fixing scandal that happened many years ago are in Korean prison for it. So,
Ah, I didn't hear about
yeah,
that. Wow.
it was a very, very serious issue, but yeah, just there was a lot of match fixing going on in the Korean StarCraft 2 scene, which unfortunately didn't help the StarCraft 2 scene. So there was that, and then on top of that, Blizzard really didn't put much love into StarCraft 2. It was just kind of a, hey, here's the story, here's the units, they kind of work. We're not really sponsoring majors, so we're hoping the community can take over and, just run their own tournaments. We'd be happy to, sponsor some tournaments here and there, but yeah, that's all we got. And then towards the end of StarCraft 2's life, they released these sort of PvE missions where it was kind of a 2-on-1 sort of thing. So you and a friend would go against a AI controlled faction, and you guys would have to kind of team up, use your synergies between the races and everything. And then pretty much after the last mission pack, they were just like, okay, so I guess we're done. It was nice. It was nice kind of doing what we did, but that's really all we can do. So, for anyone that cares, just buy these map packs up. Otherwise, we're not going to really do anything. So that's where StarCraft kind of died. And then Command and Conquer, unfortunately, had um, that really, really chintzy mobile game
Right.
that was kind of like baby's first RTS sort of. And then when that didn't do well, they're just like, okay, well, we'll just make the Command and Conquer collection. And of course, a lot of people bought into it, and they're just like, hey, um, if you guys are interested in doing more Command and Conquer, the community was just kind of like, if you're willing to do more, we'd love to see something that's a bit more proper return to form. And of course, EA has kind of left it as well, think about it, and then no substantial information has been heard since then.
Yeah. I haven't heard any of the sales, but I didn't hear that the sales for the Command and Conquer collection did very well. I didn't hear it was bad, but I didn't hear like it sold gangbusters. So I don't think EA is going to put a lot of resources or effort or even attention to Command and Conquer. At least that's
Yeah,
my opinion. Unless like it was one of those pull here to escape to save us by announcing a new Command and Conquer kind of thing. I don't see that. I don't see that happening, and that's also essentially why I am not sure. Like, I hope this is priced at like $20 or $30 because I don't think an RTS can sell for $60 anymore or 50.
oh no.
It would have to be cheap. It would have to be one of those things where, oh, I'm nostalgic for that. Oh, and it's $20. Yeah, why not? That would be where you get the sales. Not. I don't think this would be a premium game that you would have to sell it as.
Yeah,
So
I would say maybe 30 at the top end.
yeah, I'd agree with that.
So, but yeah, just I think this particular game just looks great for anyone who's looking to fill the void for just an old-fashioned RTS style game that's got a real spiritual successor vibe to Command and Conquer. Then yeah, Tempest Rising is probably something to keep an eye out for.
Right. Next up was Jagged Alliance. I'm going to stay with the PC games because there were a good number of them. Jagged Alliance 3 was announced. I don't know if you're familiar with this franchise at all, but basically, this is kind of like XCOM to a certain extent, only set in a realistic world. And I think the RPG elements were a little bit deeper than, let's say, with XCOM. I was surprised that they announced it, and I'm actually I'm excited, but on the other hand, like I remember 2 really wasn't the last one they did wasn't that hot, so they would really have to do different things to this to make it more exciting, especially since XCOM is now really that type of game presently is what everyone thinks of. So they would really have to do something different or make it really well polished for that to do very well.
I've always kind of thought Jagged Alliance was sort of neat. It was always something, at least for me, that was sort of on the periphery. So didn't really have active interest in it, but also thought it was kind of just just a plain neat game and everything. So for anyone who enjoys kind of um, the real time turn-based combat and everything, uh, it's it's definitely probably going to be just a lot more of what Jagged Alliance fans were a fan of. So yeah, just looks like more of what Jagged Alliance fans want. So hopefully it does well, and hopefully doesn't disappoint fans is really all I can say.
I am surprised this is not coming to consoles. It's only scheduled for PC, but with because the XCOM games had success on consoles, so I'm just a little surprised by that. So okay, the other PC game that was announced was Knights of Honor 2 Sovereign. I gotta be honest with you, I didn't know there was a Knights of Honor 1. To be dead honest here, and I'm not trying to be snarky. Like I did not know that there was this series, and it essentially the best way to put it is hey, but it's Crusader Kings with a little bit of Total War's battle system. I think it is its best description. It looks fine, but if I'm a fan of Crusader Kings, I'm playing Crusader Kings. I'm not I'm not touching this. So I don't know unless there is a fan base for this game that I am not aware of. And that could be the case. I kind of don't see why you'd make this. Again, I might not know the sales. The sales might be great for what it's made for. I just don't see why you'd be interested in this unless you're getting really bored with Crusader Kings 3, which Kings 3 is so in depth, I don't see how you could. So it's kind of like someone made a knockoff Civilization, and you're like, well, wait a minute, I can infinitely play Civilization, and so many different things can happen. Why would I want to play that when I can just play Civilization? So I don't know about that.
Yeah, it looks interesting. It's definitely not in my wheelhouse, but
Yeah.
yeah, just it just seems like a game from a a period of time that has been lost to the modern era and everything. But for anyone who's kind of into uh, what looks like Age of Empires and Total War sort of mashed together, then I mean, might be up your alley.
Yeah. I mean, it does look interesting, but if it's anything like, and I keep mentioning Crusader Kings, um, I've tried Crusader Kings, and I like complicated games. That was way too much for me. Like that was like, holy crap! This is way too in depth. So hey, if you're into that and you're bored with Crusader Kings, you might want to check it out. I just don't know what the sales are going to be like, and that enough to warrant it to be in your showcase for the big games that are coming out that year. The other PC game that was also announced was the Valiant. I gotta be honest, I'm looking at the list now, and I don't remember what the Valiant was. If I recall correctly, it was a... Let's get back onto the hype stage here. On our Discord, we have a thing called hype stage. Whenever there's a presentation,
It's another RTS game.
That's what I thought. Okay, all right.
Yeah,
I just
RTS RPG, but with squad-based tactics, and the setting is apparently in 13th century Europe and Middle East.
That's right. I mentioned that in the Discord that it was set in the Crusades, right?
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay. So okay. I mean, there are people who are interested in the Crusades. So do I want to know them? Not really. But that's cool. But again, that's really weird. Like, this is a big company that wants to really start churning out games and making money, and they're betting it on RTSs and tactical RPGs. Like, I don't. I mean, they do have other games that we're going to discuss, but I just don't. I don't know. But those are so niche that I don't see how they can get much of a profit unless they're outstanding. But THQ Nordic isn't known for making and producing outstanding games right now, so I just don't know how to take that right now. So
Yeah, at least from what it sounds like, since THQ Nordic is part of the Embracer Group,
yeah,
it sounds like that THQ Nordic is sort of a Skunkworks label for some of the more experimental, maybe even niche sorts of games, and they're basically kind of using the label as just kind of a yeah, we're just going to release games that maybe there's a passionate developer who's really dead set on making like an old-timey game that won't sell gangbusters, but at the same time, we can just shuffle it under this label because it really won't. It really won't matter because it's not something that we need to keep the company afloat or whatever.
right.
And at least that's what it has seemed like with some of the Embracer Group's decisions. That you've got some studios that are just completely left to their own devices, and it's just kind of a hey, you can do whatever you want. At least try to make something that is beloved, critically acclaimed, and at least pulls in some money. It doesn't need to be profitable. It just needs to at least break even or something like that. At least that's been sort of the vibe I've been getting with just how some of the smaller studios at Embracer and in particular THQ Nordic have been running.
Okay, like that kind of makes sense if Embracer can get support from big tentpole games like Tomb Raider and Deus Ex, that kind of makes sense to do that. So yeah, that okay. I want to get through this real quick. Way of the Hunter. I know a lot of people when they saw this balked at this, but I remember at my time from working at Walmart how much Cabela's and those types of games sell. I think a lot of people will be surprised by how many people buy those hunting games. So as much as I know no one was interested on the live stream, I think if they do that right, it will sell very well, especially since I don't think Cabela's hasn't made a game in a while. So, am I interested in it? No, I don't care. But I know that those sell pretty well if they're good. Well, even if they're not good, really, they sell. So,
Yeah, so and I'm kind of the same mind. When I saw that, I was just like, oh yeah, if this is pretty good and less um uh, pretty good with just sort of a low barrier of entry, then yeah, this is going to be great for the Cabela's or um most dangerous hunts sort of buyers and stuff like that.
see, I played them once, and accessible is not what they are. They are straight up. They are straight up hunting simulations. Like you have to have the right call, like the right like duck call, and the right type of ammo, and you have to wear the right type of camo and stuff like that. Like it is surprisingly in depth. So they are looking for people who like that stuff, and those types of games find their niche very well. So yeah, like I don't think accessibility is what they're looking for in this type of games. It is essentially hunting simulating, pretty much. Another PC game that was announced was Stuntfest World Tour. I don't understand why this is just for PC. This could easily be on console, but this is a stunt and a elimination-based stunt show game. So you're in cars, and essentially what you're doing is you're flying. What the trailer showed was you're flying off ramps, and then you're exiting the car in the middle of the jump to do stunts. And I don't know what kind of game really that's like. I don't know like how much that will keep someone occupied if that's all you're doing. There's got to be more to it. I would think, right?
Yeah, it seemed like it was kind of almost like Trials and maybe some Joe Danger in it. Just kind of a weird sort of game, just um, in general and everything. But
Yeah,
hopefully it's cheap because just I don't see that one being a real big seller, especially if it's priced at like a full retail game at $60 or something. That might be a little hard for some people to swallow.
that smells like a free to play game to me. I'd be surprised if it was even $20. This looks like a concept of a game to a certain extent. I watched it and I just was like, who is this for? Like maybe if like I was thinking like Stuntman. Remember the PS1 game Stuntman?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Like maybe that, but even then, Stuntman was grounded in reality to a certain extent. But even then, I still looked at it and went, "Who is this for?" Like I don't get it. Another game that was announced this time is going to consoles. Destroy All Humans 2 Reprobed. I don't know many people who are excited for the Destroy All Humans franchise. I mean, I know some who are curious about it, or they remember playing it and says, "Oh yeah, that was a good time. Yeah, I'll play it again, I guess." And that's it. I don't know anyone who's actually excited for it.
I had some former friends who were really into the Destroy All Humans games back on I want to say PS2.
Really?
I they were really into it, but I think they kind of like the sort of B movie vibe those games had.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So I would imagine that if they're still fans of that stuff, that this announcement was probably just like Christmas to them.
Okay. AEW Fight Forever was announced. That is definitely a console game. It's looking to be competition to WWE 2K, which for the past, I would say, 5 or 6 years have been languishing to a certain extent. I know that there was the NBA, there was one version that was so buggy that they took a year off to improve it. I remember that. I think that was WWE 2K20 is when that happened. This is gonna be more like what it looks like. It looks more like the old SmackDown games. I don't know if you remember You probably don't remember those games because you weren't a wrestling fan at the time. But
Actually, I do, mostly
oh,
because my cousin loved wrestling. So
okay.
whenever any of the wrestling games came out for N64, just like, hell yeah, I'm buying
Oh,
that.
the N64 ones were fun as hell though. No Mercy was great.
Yep.
Um, the SmackDown ones were a lot faster and more fluid, and were a lot more showy than I would say something like No Mercy. But I think No Mercy is looked upon more fondly. So I was surprised that it was more like SmackDown than No Mercy. But that's better than what 2K is doing right now with the WWE brand. So
Yeah, and for additional clarity, the Japanese studio Yuke's is actually working on this, and they
yes,
were the ones who had been working on most of the WWE games for a long while, but then they sort of hit a burnout period with just 2K just saying, "Hey, you need to pump these year after year after year," and Yuke's was just kind of like, "Hey, we can't continue at this pace. We cannot make a quality product if we keep going like this." And of course, just it finally came to a head at one point, and they finally just said, "Forget it. We just cannot work and produce a quality product under these conditions. So figure it out."
yeah. And you know what? I don't blame them either. If you know you're making crap and they're not giving you anything to improve, then at that point I don't blame them. Like at that point, just yeah, we're out of here. Peace. See you later.
Yeah.
Um,
So
yeah,
from everything I've heard, it seems like that this is going to be sort of like a dream project for them, that they can make it as awesome and as crazy as they want. So hopefully this AEW game turns out great, because if it does, then just it's going to provide some real stiff competition for anyone who's just looking for a real good wrestling game.
yeah. And that group has been looking for one for a long time now. I still think I think some people are still playing the Fire Pro World that came out on PC years ago, which was great. Yeah, again, that was years ago. Outcast 2: A New Beginning was announced. Zero, I didn't know there was an Outcast 1. This happened twice in this. Like, oh, there's a Cutter Slade is back. I'm like, who the fuck is Cutter Slade? I was like, wait a minute. But apparently, this is a third-person shooter. Like, it looked good. It looked fluid-ish, and it looked okay. So, but the writing was kind of corny. So, It looked good. I would say. I'm not entirely impressed by it, but it was fine. If it showed fine is how I would put it.
Yeah, I mean, granted, it's a sequel to a game from 1999, so
Oh my
maybe
god,
they're
that long
trying to
ago?
go for that sort of camp feeling from the late 90s, early 2000s era.
Huh. Okay. Well, the next thing that was announced was a remake of the RPG Gothic. Now, I remember Gothic was a PC game, right?
Yeah,
Right. And I remember bits and pieces about it. So when I saw it, I was like, okay, that looks interesting. But I didn't realize it was a remake. So, yeah. I mean, again, looks interesting, but that type of space, I don't know how many people were fans of Gothic. I would have to assume a good amount if they're remaking the first one. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, they would have to really show it off and be impressive for it to have any meaningful sales.
yeah. I know the original game is pretty much well beloved, especially since it has almost 100 hours of gameplay, tons of weapons and tons of spells, and just all sorts of things you can do in the world and everything. So um, I know that there's quite a fan base for the original game. So um, definitely curious on how um, this remake or reboot, whatever the hell this ends up being,
Hmm.
turns out. Because if it ends up maybe being Skyrim but better, who knows? That might just be enough for people to kind of give it a chance and just take a crack at it and everything.
Yeah, no, definitely. If it is able to scratch that itch that maybe games like Greedfall and Alex couldn't do, I mean, there could be good sales in this, but it really has to be worth the time and catch people's eye. So I think this is one of those things where they're hoping it will be a big sales boost and not just a tiny hit. So yeah. Recreation was announced from Three Fields Entertainment. This is a team made up of developers from Burnout and Need for Speed, and they combine the two with a course creator that feels more like Trackmania than I would say of any of those two games. So that is interesting, I guess. But now that it mentions Burnout, man, I miss Burnout. God,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think a lot of people miss Burnout, me included. Burnout Paradise was cute, but I just kind of get a little bit of ADD with open world games because there's just so much to do. It ends up just being a glut of things to do, and I just end up kind of overwhelmed to a point. I'm just like, okay, well, I don't really know what to do, so I'm just gonna just stop this game and come back to it later. And then, of course, later never comes.
My favorite is always going to be three. I think you preferred Revenge. Am I right on that?
Yeah, I think. Well, God.
Revenge came out on 360 as well as PS2 and Xbox, but three just was perfect to me. Like all the races, all the modes just felt like great. Like all of them were fun to play. I didn't have as much fun as I did with Revenge, even though Revenge is good. But yeah, so Recreation sounds interesting, I guess.
Yeah, definitely seems interesting. So I'll be very curious to how that one pans out.
And finally, the game that closed out the stream was SpongeBob SquarePants: The Cosmic Shake. Yeah. So, I
Yeah,
mean, despite being a SpongeBob game, you know what it is. I mean, it's gonna sell buckets, but it's a SpongeBob game. It's a 3D platformer. I've heard they're serviceable, but they sell a lot. So, yeah, it's a. See, I don't get why they do this. Like these companies do this. I get you want to advertise a game is coming out, but know your audience. The only people who are going to be watching this are like hardcore. Well, I hate to say hardcore gamers. Enthusiasts. Enthusiasts of gaming are the ones that are going to be watching this, and none of them are going to be interested in a SpongeBob game. Like, really. Like, again, know your audience at this point. So I thought that was weird that they closed it out with a SpongeBob game.
yeah. I would have thought that this would have been either in the beginning or the middle, especially since
Yeah.
it kind of has a vibe of like Banjo and Kazooie with just the platforming, the collection of items, and stuff like that.
Right. And then they tease the new South Park game is coming. So, and that's it. That's it. Overall, I mean, I'm glad they didn't make this an E3 stream because that would have been not great. But there's some interesting PC games that I would be sort of interested in. But as a showcase of what they're showing for the next year, I wouldn't call it strong. I think it's decent, but I don't, except for maybe SpongeBob, I don't see anything that will sell a lot or have a captive audience who are going to want to know more about these games. So, yeah, it's fine. It's a fine stream, but I don't think it did what it was intended to do, which is basically get people more excited for these games. It's just more like, oh yeah, that's what you're doing? Cool, I guess. And that was it. Nothing really exciting.
Just I kind of felt the same way. It was just kind of like, hey, it's nice, it's interesting. Just um, maybe there will be some people who are really into um, the whole thing of just vintage style games and everything. But yeah, just for me, it was just one of those things that I was just like, yeah, I don't really see anyone but the hardcore gaming fans really being into, because just honestly, things like RTSs are generally not really just sort of games that have a widespread audience.
I think they're
And
they're more niche than anything, especially to an older crowd. You're not going to see somebody my nephew's age, or maybe someone who's in their college years, who are going to say, "Oh my God, I need a new StarCraft." It is meant for old fucks like us, essentially, like
yeah,
who used to
totally.
play those games when we were younger, and maybe are nostalgic for that.
Yeah. So, and that's pretty much a good way to put it, especially since just, um, I mean, I hate to sound like just one of those old fogies who's just like back in my day, sort of, but
Mm.
yeah, it's just really just stuff that definitely has a niche audience. And I mean, while I'm happy to see niche audiences getting catered to, at the same time, just this would have been something that I want to say would have been better for like the PC game show this past or earlier in the summer.
Yeah, I agree there. Yeah, you're right. You're dead on that one. Because the ones that sell the most, and I hate to say this too, the ones that sell the most really are console games. So you want to have those console games up front first before you really do a PC centric, like, do a PC centric stream. Yeah, I totally agree with you. That makes a lot of sense. Let us move on to the next topic. So, Zero, the Spider-Man PC port came out last Friday, I believe. And am I right on that? Was it last Friday or was it last week?
Yeah, yeah,
Yes. Okay.
because I remember that was when the banners went up on Steam.
Oh, good. Okay. And as such, of course, the game got data mined. And as it got data mined, some people noticed some interesting things within the code. The one thing that they noticed is that apparently PlayStation had files alluding to a PC launcher that they had within the files of Spider-Man Remastered. As this was shown, rumors started going around that apparently in the new games that are coming out from PlayStation, you're probably going to have a PlayStation Network account in order to play those PC games. That's rumored, but the files found in the Spider-Man Remastered is true. That was definitely found within the data mine when it came to Spider-Man Remastered. Zero, are you looking forward to having another PC launcher on your PC if and when this happens?
Not really, mostly because it's just bad enough. But I presume that this is more Sony trying to get PC players involved with their new PlayStation Stars program, which is for anyone who's forgotten, we talked about it maybe a couple episodes ago, but it's essentially kind of like a Club Nintendo sort of program where you'll have achievements in games that you can chase after for points, and then you can redeem those points for actual material rewards. So things like maybe a set of coasters with some artwork from a game, or maybe something more premium and nice, like just a real big statue that retail value is maybe like $100. So that might be one of those extreme rewards that you've just got to have like a crazy shit ton of points. So that's really where I kind of see this decision to make a PlayStation launcher just something to be able to do sort of play in metrics tracking to try to get PC players involved on the PlayStation Stars program that's supposedly supposed to be debuting later this year.
I got a question for you, Zero.
Yeah.
Do you think this has anything to do with the PS Plus being revamped to have those new tiers? Maybe to, even though they're saying they're not competing with Game Pass, to essentially compete with Game Pass.
Yeah, I mean, I could potentially see this being sort of a gateway, especially if Sony wants to feel like that they can kind of keep toe-to-toe with Microsoft and Game Pass. I could see something like, hey, don't own a PS4 or don't own a PS5, but want to play the vintage PS Plus games on PS Premium? Well, here you go. Just now we've got a emulator that plays our proprietary encrypted files, so you can run this game at full FPS the way you want and all this other junk. So
right.
I could potentially see that being sort of a path to shoehorn in this sort of functionality.
Some were saying or were alluding to this, that if they do this, then what everyone's thinking is then you'll be able to play either PlayStation 5 games from the cloud onto your PC, which is possible. But they also said that, then if you buy, let's say, Gran Turismo 7 and they bring a PC port, you'll just get the PC port automatically on the PS launcher. That's great. No, that ain't happening. They'll make you purchase it again. Let's be honest with ourselves here. Because they could have easily done that with Spider-Man Remastered with Steam. Because I think few people remember this, but there is a link to Steam and the PlayStation Network. Do you remember where that came from?
Yes, Half-Life, the orange box.
No, Portal 2.
Portal 2 even, okay.
Because what happened was, and I remember this, because I remember this when I was doing was looking for news stories. When Portal 2 came out, this was a little bit after, I believe, Gabe Newell apologized for his comments about the PS3 and how it was, I guess, garbage hardware, essentially. And he went on stage on PlayStation, and he basically announced that Portal 2 is coming to PS3. It was also coming to 360. But if you purchased it on PlayStation 3 and you linked your Steam account, you got Portal 2 for free on PC. So there are probably a lot of people who are still linked to Steam through their PSN account. They could have easily just gave you Spider-Man Remastered for free, and they didn't. Why? Because you'll pay for it. That's why. So
Yep.
those who are thinking, oh, here comes Sony is going to do the pro-consumer thing by giving us free PC ports, guys, get real. I mean, that's not going to happen. And right now, Sony is not in the what do you call it? The pro-consumer mode right now. They're
Yeah.
back into PS2 to PS3 mode where their shit don't stink and they're going to do anything they can get away with. That's where they're at right now.
Yeah, I mean, they're definitely not in a charitable mood, and that's
Ooh.
apparently clear, especially with consideration that PS Plus Premium made big promises about putting out a whole bunch of vintage games, and well, just this new month cycle of PS Plus hasn't really had any major vintage announcements, so take that for what you will.
I know. And then with a lot of, like, the one I was looking forward to was Tactics Ogre's List Cling Together for PSP. But since that's being redone into Tactics Ogre Reborn, which priced at $50, you can get real on that. I That's like the only PSP game I'm sort of interested in playing. Maybe Dissidia, but I also have those games, so I don't need to really get the PSN version essentially. So not only are they not putting out a lot of vintage stuff, the stuff they're showing isn't that interesting. As much as I like Jumping Flash, you know, Jumping Flash is not that hot anymore. So that's not one of the games that would really interest me. Myself, I would say, particularly. And I don't think it interests much people either on that sense.
Yeah, I mean, stuff like Jumping Flash was a curiosity for its time, and I mean, it's kind of interesting to visit as a historical curiosity, but yeah, it's not any sort of award-winning gameplay by any means, at least in the modern day.
Oh, yeah. And even when it was out, it kind of looked like crap, to be absolutely honest with you. But it's just a charming enough game. Like, you play a robot bunny that shoots things. But because it was charming is why it really gained any kind of a following. And it was a very small following. Because I think they did Jumping Flash 2, and that didn't do so hot. So, yeah, I mean... But anyway, back to what it is. Yeah, this is essentially Sony. I think I would be surprised if they announced, like at the Game Awards this year, to a certain extent, that they're doing this. They're having a PC launcher, and you'll get those games. You could still get them on Steam, but you have to sign into the PlayStation Network in order to do that, to a certain extent, or they could just make God of War Ragnarok a PS launcher exclusive and do it that way. So
Yeah, and I think that is really the more plausible play. Just um, big tentpole game to introduce the new PlayStation launcher, and then just grab grab all the people who have loved the PlayStation Studios branded games on PC and just say, "Oh, well, you want to play real PlayStation games? There's only one place to get all the PlayStation games, and that's going to be on the new PlayStation PC launcher."
yeah, and then and watch if that happens. Final Fantasy VII Remake 2 is probably going to go on that launcher. I mean, we're looking at the PC. We're probably going to look at the PC separating even more on the, like, when it comes to those launchers, like with Epic and Origin and Steam and all that, and GOG. I just see that happening more and more because Sony is not in a place of weakness, and they still don't feel like they are. They feel like they can do whatever they want. That is why Microsoft is being so pro-consumer right now. Because, look, I like what Microsoft is doing, but if they didn't get their asses handed to them on the Xbox One, they wouldn't be doing any of this. So they're not doing this because, hey, we're pro-consumer. It's like, no, they needed to do it, or else they would have lost whatever else they had. So that's it. Because I keep saying this, but once they get enough people, they're going to raise the price of Game Pass. I know that for a fact. So, yeah, I mean, But anyway, it's interesting. This is an interesting thing that they found. I wouldn't be surprised by next year if it was released. But yeah, anything more to add?
No, just I think that's um, it's just going to be real interesting to see where this PC launcher potentially goes, or if it even becomes a thing. Because who knows? Just Sony may just end up researching it and going, "Hey, you know what? It's too hard to run our own PC storefront. Let's just fucking keep it simple and just run it on Steam, and then just have a PlayStation API to connect to achievements and to our PlayStation Stars program." So, because what people don't realize is sometimes data mine stuff is not always final.
That's true.
Sometimes it's just concept stuff that they're just like, "Hey, this is kind of an idea we're banging on," and then later down the line, it might go. Whoever's managing the programs might go, "Ooh, actually, you know what? That's not a good idea. Let's just go ahead and cancel that idea."
Yeah.
So, I guess I would leave people with a warning of just take this with a grain of salt for now, and until Sony announces anything official, then at that point you can start making your guesses and assumptions on how things will proceed on forward from there.
Right. And you're absolutely right. This could also never happen. It could be just something that they worked on and they just left it there and they just forgot to take the code out. That's perfectly plausible. Sure. But if you ask me, I think this is more than likely going to happen. And, you know, I wouldn't be surprised if it did, basically. We'll move on. So, a couple of weeks ago, Zero, we talked about how Sony went to, I guess they were in Brazil, I think the time they were talking to, a Brazilian agency that deals with anti-competitiveness in the marketplace.
Yeah, it's essentially kind of like the equivalent of the SEC, but
Right.
in Brazil. And this story kind of got an interesting twist into it. For anyone who needs a quick recap, essentially, uh, the the Brazilian SEC had basically sort of opened up a comments panel for all of the major game companies around the world to basically comment on their thoughts on Microsoft acquiring Activision, Blizzard, and King. And of course, just most of the other publishers were just like, yeah, no big deal. Just we've got our own games, they've got their own, no big deal to us. And the PlayStation representative kind of had a whole completely different thought because they protested the idea. They were just, they had essentially said, we think that if Activision Blizzard King are to be acquired by Microsoft, this is going to adversely hurt PlayStation brand sales because there will be people that will jump hoops and ladders just to buy a Xbox console just to play Call of Duty. And that was kind of where things had been left off. But the story gets a little bit more interesting because after their comment period ended, Microsoft was actually able to kind of make a counter comment to Sony's comment. And the short of it is Xbox is saying, well, we're still going to abide by our legal contracts for games that are multi-platform. So it's not like we're suddenly going to yank away Call of Duty. So just this panic over Call of Duty magically evaporating is just unfounded. But they also kind of made a counterpoint to the Sony representative saying, "Oh, well, Xbox is also really anti-competitive too because just it allows an avenue for more people to go towards a Microsoft product." And the counterpoint that the Microsoft representative had was really interesting because they had said, "Okay, well, you really can't use the Game Pass argument because you guys have recently started a Game Pass-like service that recently debuted, right?"
Yep.
And then just to kind of rub salt in the wound too, they're like, if anyone's engaged in anti-competitive activities, it's Sony because Sony has actually forced developers who wanted to go multi-platform and also feature their game on a service like Microsoft's Xbox Game Pass, they basically held that game hostage to the PlayStation service unless the developer pays an exorbitant fee.
Yeah.
So it was kind of an interesting play by Microsoft in this Brazilian council sort of thing.
Right. And it is fair to criticize that and to point that out, because Sony, what they're doing is saying, oh, poor us, this is going to leave us in a clear disadvantage. And what Microsoft is saying is, no, not really, because if you are good at business and you know how to do this efficiently, you can get those people to go to your console. For example, this is what you did for this game, and you clearly did that. So you know that you're fine. So F off is essentially what as Microsoft is saying. That being said, though, Zero, I mean, let's be fair, okay? This acquisition gives Microsoft a very distinct advantage, because the minute, and we both, unless Call of Duty dies off in the next 3 years, which is a possibility, unless that happens, you know damn well they're gonna make they're gonna make Call of Duty either exclusive, or they're gonna make it so it's available on day one on Game Pass. And when they do that, you know damn well more people are going to be like, oh, wait, I can get that for $15 on Game Pass, or spend $70 on PlayStation? I'm going to go get the Xbox version. That does give them an advantage. But what Sony needs to do is provide better advantages on their end that makes it more appealing for customers to do that. They basically are complaining, oh, we have to be more pro-consumer now in order to compete, and we didn't have to do that before, so you're just being anti-competitive, which is not the case. That's not what's happening at all.
It's just kind of funny, just they're playing the, oh, poor us, woe is us, woe is us. And it's just like, you guys are currently on top as far as the two major consoles go. You guys do have a war chest that you can pull from. Just suck it the fuck up, open up your war chest, and spend some goddamn money to maintain your competitive advantage. If you think you can just coast and not really invest in keeping your competitive advantage, then I'm sorry, you deserve to lose your competitive advantage.
Yeah, and it's not that Microsoft isn't doing this either. They are too. And one of the funniest things that I've ever read is basically them saying, actually, Call of Duty kind of sucks, you know? I mean, we don't have that much advantage. Call of Duty is not what it used to be, you know? It's not that big of a deal, right? Like, really downplaying exactly the scope, that the importance that Call of Duty has, which is also, in a way, kind of scummy to a certain extent. But, yeah, I mean, they're both doing it, clearly. But I just find it funny how they're trying to outdo each other by claiming, oh, we're just at a clear disadvantage, or, oh, it's not as big of a deal as you think it is. Like, they're both playing the game, essentially, of trying to skate around responsibility and to actually be competitive in the marketplace. Is basically what they're doing. So,
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, yeah, basically, that's it, really. I mean, so what's going to happen is these are going to go through, because it's looking more and more like the U.S. government, which really dictates what goes on in this. Because if the U.S. government essentially says, yeah, this is fine, there's no way Brazil is going to be like, well, we don't like it, so you can't do it. They're just going to say, all right, whatever, I don't care. And they're going to do it anyway. So what's Brazil going to do at that point? Hate to sound like a stereotypical American on that point, but it is the truth. Because if, let's say, one country does do that and America says it's okay, America is the biggest economy in the world, and they help run other economies around the world. So if America says it's okay, it would be a fool's errand for another country to fight that. It would just be completely silly, because then all Sony or Microsoft would do is be, okay, then those games are not going to be released in Brazil. Done. Nothing is going to happen in this, is what I'm trying to say. Like, it's not going to be. There's not going to be a controversy. There's not going to be a big deal where the government's going to say, okay, well then this is not going through. The more and more I think about this, the more and more I believe it will. There was a period of time where some were thinking this may not go through, but clearly I think it's going to. What do you think?
As much as Sony's trying to play the court of public opinion in this Brazilian SEC council meeting, I think ultimately the deal with Activision Blizzard is going to go through. Just they've pretty much just proven to the US FTC and SEC that just we don't see that this is going to be a monopoly situation and stuff like that. And unfortunately, just if they've already proven their point is solid and everything, then there's really not much to stop the deal, save for just something explosive, evidence-wise, just coming out of nowhere and changing the whole landscape. But honestly, I just don't see that.
Yeah, me neither. Anything else you want to
Um, Not really. I think it'll be just more interesting to see how this pans out, especially if the Brazilian government decides to protest against this and say, "Yeah, we don't like this." And at that point, I just don't know what'll happen if they'll have to tax games from Microsoft publishing Activision Blizzard stuff with like an extra tax charge or something in Brazil. I don't know. I just know that as far as game pricing in South America, it's completely topsy turvy.
Yeah.
I think Rockstar and Capcom recently announced that they'd be increasing prices for those two regions, so games are going to be even more expensive by those two brands. So,
Right.
oh, who knows if they decide to protest the union of Microsoft and Activision, and even though the US says, hey, we think it's fine, it's not that big a deal, and same goes for the rest of the world. So, yeah, really, it's really going to be interesting to see what happens in Brazil if they decide to say, yeah, we protest this.
Yeah. All right, Zero. As this was a light week, we're about at the end of this podcast. But as always, I have a question for you.
All right.
All right. I wanted to include this as a story, but I realized this is better off as the question of the week, so I went along with this. Forspoken, for some reason, is advertising their game, which I thought is weird since it's not coming out until January of next year. Still, I mean, that still could get delayed. Would I be surprised by that? No, but anyway, that was a bit of a surprise. What was extra surprising was the reaction to the ad, which was incredibly negative. And by negative, not as in an offensive way, but in a way of, this is just plain terrible. It showed the main character of the game basically being very quippy and kind of being very self-aware in a jokey way. A lot of people basically say it's kind of like a Joss Whedon writing style that they were going for, but and in my opinion too, it completely failed, because the thing with Joss Whedon is that his characters are actually charming, where this did not make the characters seem charming at all. Zero, I don't know if did you actually watch the ad?
Yeah, I did, and I was just like, I don't know how I feel about this.
Yeah. Yeah. At no point, I was kind of the same way until I was like, oh, this is just plain bad. That's not good. But yeah, the question I wanted to point out is this, okay? After that ad came by, there was a bit of a discussion going on Twitter, and it basically goes down like this. One person asked this question: do you guys really care if the game has bad writing? Because if the game has good gameplay, does it really matter that the characters, the story, and the dialogue is bad? So I'm going to ask you that question, okay? will you play a video game if it has bad dialogue, story, or character?
I have in the past,
Mhm.
so it's more because the game has something else to offer, so like solid gameplay or just um, it's got a solid hook somewhere else, and story, dialogue, or characters aren't really aren't really the main hook for me. So I have done so in the past. I'm drawing a blank on which games that I've done that for, but I can certainly say that in the past I have played games that either the dialogue was terrible, the story was lackluster, the characters were just plain flat and boring.
Right. And my thing on it is basically, does it matter to the game? So if it's like, I don't know, if it's a beat 'em up game, who cares at that point? Because you are playing it specifically for the gameplay. Like you basically have a threadbare plot that will let you go from screen to screen and do what you gotta do. That's different. But when the story clearly matters, or the dialogue or characters are supposed to matter in the game to enjoy it. Let's say, for example, I don't know. Let's say God of War, okay? Let's say you were playing God of War, and the dialogue is just awful, okay? Could you enjoy it with just with his gameplay? Sure. But with how much it stops for story beats and dialogue and stuff like that, then it becomes a chore to play. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like I would also say, like, let's say Skyrim, for example, okay? Skyrim, as much as it is popular as a video game, I think anyone could pretty much say that the writing sucks in Skyrim. And it's not why you're playing it. You're playing it for the immersive world and the gameplay and just exploring everywhere in the game. The story is just tangential. But if the story sucked in, let's say, a Final Fantasy game, there ain't no script. There is no way I'm playing it.
Yeah.
The example I would have is Final Fantasy 13. I bounced off that real quick. But if the story was good, I might not have. But it wasn't. I think one example I will use where the story kept me playing the game, even though I wasn't much of a fan of the gameplay, was BioShock Infinite. And I know a lot of people are going to hear that and go, whoa, 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 what? Are you kidding me? Like, yeah. The gameplay in BioShock Infinite is at best. It's very basic shooting. There's a little bit of strategy, but just enough to not keep you bored. But it's the story and the dialogue and the characters that pushed me through to the end in the game. To where I personally really like the game. But even I have to admit, I kind of suffer through the gameplay to play that.
Yeah.
But I think if the story and the characters and the dialogue is supposed to be something you should be enjoying to play the game, then it's important. But if it's something that obviously there's no effort put into it, it's not that important, who cares? Like, it is such a minor thing that you shouldn't really pay attention to it, then it doesn't matter. It just depends on the game, is my opinion.
That's also kind of another angle that I've heard too, just where a game story is all right, but just maybe just the just this the story might be a little bit of a slog, or the gameplay might not feel great, but I mean, either the world or the characters are engaging enough that you're just like, yeah, you know what, I'll just suffer through it. Not a big deal.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I'll even put it this way too, okay? A story can be bad, dialogue can be bad, characters can be bad, and I can still enjoy a game okay. Like, if the gameplay is outstanding, fine. But when it insults your intelligence is when I'm like, okay, what the hell are you doing? Like, if it gets to that point, then, and I can't skip anything, like, if it forces me to watch, then yeah, at that point, I kind of, like, I might jump off. Like, when Street Fighter 5 came out and they finally had the story mode, like, I played one of those, and I was like, yeah, I ain't playing any of this crap. This is terrible. So, and that essentially jumped me right off of Street Fighter 5 because I wasn't really a big fan of the fighting game, but I was going to give it a chance. But since the single player content was bad, I was like, all right, forget it, I'm done. And I've never played it since. So that it may not be important to some games, but if it's so bad it insults your intelligence, that could also be that could be a bad issue too. So that could be a reason something would be can jump right off of it. It really depends on, I guess, the gamer too, because I know I hear a bunch of gamers who are like, I just want it to be fun. I don't want it to be art. I don't want it to have a message. I just want to blow shit up and have fun and check out. Which, fine, you can do that. That's not an issue. Like, you can definitely do that with some games. So that depends on them too. So if they literally don't want to pay attention to the story at all, then that's fine too. So yeah, depends on the person, depends on the game.
Just the fact that sometimes we suffer through what may seem like a bad game because there's something else that's a redeeming quality.
Right, absolutely. We've talked before, I don't know on here, but maybe off this, how way back when, like, I guess it also matters that because we've gotten older too, like way back when gaming stories were pretty bad. I mean, to an extent they still are, in my opinion at least, but gaming stories way back when were really bad too. So you had to go through all that in order to enjoy the game. I think Ninja Gaiden was the first time that I actually somewhat enjoyed a story in a game that I recall. And the rest of them were like, yeah, whatever, they captured the princess, go rescue her, fuck off, go. You know, like, whatever. I guess, like I said, it just really depends on the game. But if they are clearly insulting your intelligence is when I'm like, yeah, I'm going to bounce off this. And I hate the type of people who say, oh, but the story gets good 15, 20 hours in. I don't care. If it's, and I know you feel this way too. Like, I don't care. If it takes me more than 2 hours, like a movie's time, for something to get good, I am not playing it anymore. I'm done. Like, that part of my life is over. I'm done with that. So if you want your game to be played, it better be good right away. Because I'm not going to play give it 10 or 15 hours and it will get good. I don't care. Like, forget it.
Yeah, because it can be a little brutal just having to kind of suffer through that much, especially if there's not a guaranteed return. And I mean, if it's a little slow to develop, but it's engaging on its way to developing, then yeah, I'll suffer through it a little bit. But yeah, just if it's just a plain just miserable experience to get to that point where I swear if you just hold on, it just gets good after this moment, then yeah, no way, no how. I'm not going to stick around for that.
Right. No, absolutely. Absolutely. All right, Zero, on that note, we are at the end of this episode of the Capital Games Podcast. Tune in next week. We talk about the going-ons and happenings in the gaming industry. I am The Wiz.
And I'm Zero.
And we will talk to you next week. Bye.